Hey everyone, in this video we'll be discussing about hypothalamus and pituitary. These are the two main important endocrine glands that actually control the entire endocrine system. So first we'll be talking about the hypothalamus. Now what is the hypothalamus? Hypothalamus is this organ that is located in the brain. So this is located in the forebrain right below the thalamus. So hypo means actually below, so below thalamus. So this is thalamus, this is hypothalamus. So here it is. And this is a organ that actually controls the homeostasis of the body. So it is responsible for the homeostasis in our body. Homeostasis is nothing but maintaining a healthy and balanced functioning in the body. So balance is what is we call homeostasis. As you have heard earlier, there is the temperature homeostasis. So we are the organisms that actually have homeostasis in our body. We maintain a specific temperature. We maintain a specific pH in our body. Not all organisms show homeostasis. Lower organisms usually do not show homeostasis. So, hypothalamus maintains homeostasis, and in order to do this, it actually regulates the entire endocrine system. So, it does it by actually releasing two types of hormones mainly. One is the releasing hormone, and another one is the inhibiting hormone. So these hormones act on the pituitary gland. This is the pituitary gland, which we'll be discussing later. And this pituitary gland then regulates the entire endocrine system, all the glands. The hypothalamus here consists of a group of neurosecretory cells. Neurosecretory cells are nothing but the nerve cells which actually receive a nerve signal. So these are nothing but neurons. They receive a nerve signal and then they convert this nerve signal into a chemical signal. Now chemical signal here becomes the hormone. As I said here, there is a releasing hormone and there is inhibiting hormones. This is what it releases, right? So these are neurohormones and these are nothing but the chemical signals that are generated after the hypothalamus receives a nervous signal. So as you know, the neuron, it looks something like this. So its body is like this. Then it has a body or the axon, and then it has dendrites. So these are the ends, and this is the axon. So this is the body through which the signals actually transfer. So this is axon here that we have discussed. So this is the axon, and this here what happens is it receives a nerve signal here, and then it transfers it into a chemical signal. Now this chemical signal becomes a hormone. So this is nothing but a neurosecretory cell. In hypothalamus, these neurosecretory cells are called nuclei. So usually when these hormones are produced in a neurosecretory cell, they travel through this axon only and they produce a reaction. So here what happens is the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. So we'll be discussing about pituitary gland now. So let's talk about the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, after we talk about the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in detail, we can talk about the synchronization. Here you can see a small organ. This is the pituitary gland, and this is attached to the hypothalamus with the help of a small stalk-like structure. As you can see here, this is what the pituitary is. Here, this is actually directly present below the hypothalamus, and it's attached to the hypothalamus by a small stalk-like structure. So this stalk-like structure is nothing but a connection between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. It is a small pea-shaped or a pea-sized gland. So it is as big as a pea. It's very tiny gland, and it is present below the hypothalamus. And through this small stalk-like structure, some blood vessels and neurons will run through from hypothalamus and the pituitary. So this is the way that they communicate. So this is the master gland. So this is known as the master gland because this is the one that actually controls directly all the endocrine glands, all other endocrine glands. So hypothalamus acts on this, and and signals it whether it has to release or inhibit something. As I said in the previous video, that our we coordinate the coordination occurs between two things. As I gave an example of our feet, to achieve an ultimate result. So here also, all these endocrine systems coordinate with each other to produce something called homeostasis. As I said, homeostasis is a healthy, balanced maintenance of our body. So hypothalamus is responsible for that, and it produces a homeostasis in our body. So to produce homeostasis in our body, it coordinates with the pituitary gland. In turn, pituitary gland coordinates with all our endocrine glands and produces a balance in our body. To produce balance in body, some vital functions will happen, and in that we get the normal functioning of our body. So here this happens through this small stalk-like structure. So hypothalamus and pituitary communicate with each other by the presence of blood vessels and neurons. Now this pituitary gland, it is located in a sphenoid bone cavity which is called sella turcica. So this is the bone cavity and it is located there. Since it is a very important gland, it has to be protected, so it is enclosed here. It has two major lobes. Now, usually in many organisms, pituitary gland will have three lobes. One is the anterior, then we have intermediate and the posterior. But in humans, what happens is the intermediate lobe gets fused with the posterior lobe. So we have the only two major lobes we have. So this is the anterior, that is the frontal lobe, not the anterior, sorry, the frontal lobe, which is called the adenohypophysis, the one in the front. So this entire lobe along with the intermediate is called the adenohypophysis. Now adenohypophysis, and we have another, the back one, which is the posterior, which is also known as the posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis. So these are two lobes. Front one is adenohypophysis and the behind one is the posterior one is the neurohypophysis, also known as pars nervosa. Now this adenohypophysis is the entire lobe, and this is then divided into two parts. Pars distalis, which is the anterior pituitary. Then we have pars intermediate, the intermediate pituitary that is fused with the neurohypophysis. So for example, if we say that this is the pituitary gland, this is the adenohypophysis, and this is the neurohypophysis. So this whole lobe is the adenohypophysis. Now, if we say that we have on the anterior pituitary, this is the pars distalis or anterior pituitary. This fused part here is the pars intermediate. So all of these, they have their own functions and they produce their own hormones, which we'll discuss now. Before we discuss about the hormones of pituitary, let's discuss about how hypothalamus and pituitary work together. So as I said earlier here that these two synchronize and coordinate with each other to produce a chemical reaction or a function, right? So how do they do it? As I said earlier, the hypothalamus, it has a certain neurosecretory cells called nuclei, right? Neurosecretory cells are nerve cells that convert nerve signals into chemical response. This chemical response is nothing but a neurohormone. So hypothalamus consists of them, and these receive a chemical signal. So here, as you can see, the stalk-like structure I said here, which connects the hypothalamus and pituitary, it has a blood vessel system of portal circulation. And here the neurons of hypothalamus, the nerve cells, neurosecretory cells, in the anterior pituitary, how they control both anterior and posterior pituitary. For anterior pituitary, they control it with the help of this portal circulation. These neurons, they are attached to the portal circulation from hypothalamus, right? So whenever it receives a signal, nerve signal, it produces a chemical signal. That is, it produces a hormone. Now this hormone travels through this axon here. So which is the color. So travels through this axon here and it goes into this bloodstream. This is the portal circulation. Here what happens, there is an artery entering, it collapses into certain capillaries, becomes a bunch. These capillaries are very thin walled, right? So they have only a single layer of vessel here, single layer of wall here, cells here. So these capillaries are here attached to the neurons here. So whenever the chemical hormone is secreted here, it passes into this portal circulation, and it goes into the blood. So hormones, as I said, they travel through the medium of blood. So it goes into the blood, and here there is a response generated in the anterior pituitary or in the adenohypophysis, this frontal lobe. But for posterior one, what happens is these neurons, they don't connect to a portal circulation here itself, like in the stalk. They come entirely into the posterior pituitary. They run along here to the posterior pituitary, and directly through this axon only it is transferred here, the hormones, not through the portal circulation. So in either way neurons are involved, but what happens in the anterior pituitary is in the stalk itself blood vessels are involved. So through blood vessels these hormones are transported. But in the posterior pituitary the neurons run all along and they produce a chemical response here in the posterior pituitary. So there is like blood vessels are involved, but not throughout the whole system, like not from the stalk, only here in the posterior pituitary it's involved. So let me make it clear once. So for the anterior or the adenohypophysis here, anterior pituitary, what happens is the hypothalamus, okay, the hypothalamus, I'll be representing it with H, it produces a response through neurons, right? So neurons or neurosecretory cells, these neurosecretory cells go into the portal circulation. So this produce a hormone, neurohormone, which releasing or inhibiting whatever it is, it goes to the portal circulation, then to the anterior pituitary. Now in the posterior pituitary what happens is from hypothalamus it directly goes to the neurons and then into the posterior pituitary. And there is then here there is a portal circulation. Here there will be few capillaries as well, again like this, and here it will be directly transported. But there is no like here how it is from beginning itself we have a portal circulation. It does not happen here. And here what happens is the posterior pituitary by itself, it does not secrete any hormones. Only the hypothalamus secretes the hormones. It's called oxytocin and vasopressin, which we'll be studying. And it only the posterior pituitary functions as a storage and secretory organ. So it does not synthesize any hormone. It just stores and secretes it. The hypothalamus secretes hormones for the posterior pituitary. For the anterior one, it all signals the anterior pituitary. That's all.